Good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin today by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This land is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and has long been the gathering place for diverse Indigenous nations. As someone who fled genocide in my home country, I arrived in Canada seeking safety and dignity. It is not lost on me that my presence here is on land that has been taken from others with a history of displacement and violence. At the Atkinson Centre, we are committed to advancing equity in early childhood education. That commitment must include meaningful reflection and accountability to Indigenous children, families, and communities. We carry this responsibility forward in our partnership and practice. We invite everyone to reflect on their own relationship to the land and to consider how we each can contribute to truth, reconciliation, and justice. So welcome everyone to our webinar series, Beyond the Podcast. This series is designed to take us deeper into the important conversations that are sparked from our podcast, Bright Beginnings, Insights into Early Childhood Education. Each session will explore key themes from an episode, offering additional insights, practical strategies, and opportunities for dialogue. Today, we're thrilled to dive deeper into the episode Adventure Awaits, the Power of Outdoor and Risky Play. We're joined by two passionate advocates in the field. Hilary Bartlett, a Level 4 ECE based in Newfoundland and Labrador, and the project manager for the Early Childhood Educators Human Resources Council, a provincial nonprofit focused on improving recruitment and retention in the LCC sector. She is an EC consultant with the Learn Through Active Play team and on the board of directors for both the Association of Early Childhood Educators Newfoundland and Labrador and the Canadian Child Care Federation. And returning podcast guest, Veroushka Coronel, an early childhood educator, a field liaison, and a faculty at the School of Early Childhood at George Brown College. Both here to further explore the value of outdoor and risky play for both children and educators. Thank you both for being here, and we look forward to an engaging, thought-provoking discussion. We will begin with Veroushka.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and for joining this webinar today. I want to, let me see if you can post a photo. Thank you. So I want to start, first of all, I want to say, please do not take any screenshots or pictures of this photo because the family generously has allowed me to share this photo for my presentations and classes. So thank you for that. I want to start by telling you a story, the story of Cotter, right? So this is Cotter. Cotter was an energetic, inquisitive, and humorous toddler. This is a few years ago when I was working in the toddler room at one of the lab schools at George Brown College. He was always curious about how things work. In various conversations with his parents, they expressed that Cotter constantly sought out opportunities for physical risk-taking. I agree with them and share examples of how Cotter also engaged in risk-taking both indoors and outdoors. Although his parents were a little concerned, they were also very open to Cotter exploring this type of play. On a beautiful summer morning during outdoor play, I was taking pictures to later document on Story Park. I saw Cotter from a distance, standing with both feet on the seat of his favorite equipment, the tricycle, while holding onto the handlebars. My initial reaction was to run and stop him and ask him to sit down properly on the tricycle. This is the first time that I saw him doing something like this. However, I chose to walk slowly towards him while holding the device, the iPad that I was taking photos with, standing nearby in case he needed my help. Then something amazing happened. Cotter lifted his right leg onto the air, and I captured the moment in the photo that you see right in front of you. He immediately noticed me nearby, turned his head, and we made eye contact. I said, Cotter, you are so good at balancing on one leg on top of the tricycle. That's impressive. I expressed my genuine enthusiasm for his Cirque du Soleil-like kind of move, I used to call it. And I will never forget his smile and the spark in his eyes. He knew he had done something special and that I was proud of him. He then placed both feet back on the seat, sat down, and continued pedaling. I documented this episode on Story Park, and it became a topic of many conversations with his parents for days. They were so thankful that I supported Carter in taking risks during play while ensuring his safety. The photo was also printed, and we added it, my team and I, we added it to the learning environment where Carter had many opportunities to go back and relive the episode and the moment. And he always smiled and told the story in with his own toddler words. So the reason why I'm showing this example and showing this is a reflection, is a personal reflection from my part. And sorry, let me just I forgot to tell you my time. From the perspective of, oh, look what I did. I know it all, but actually from humility and from a perspective of vulnerability. Because I think as educators, when we're trying something new, something that we just still understanding, and that was me in that situation, and we need to come from that perspective of humility, right? And understanding first what is risky play. Before I got to that moment when I supported Carter in that way, I was reading and attending workshops, webinars just like this one, and just because I've been very passionate about this topic. And I was reading a lot about this, and that was a great opportunity for me as an educator to put what I've been reading and learning into practice. I want to start then again by saying, what is risky play? Because there's always mixed understandings about risky play. I would put in children in unsafe situations. I want to use a quote from Mariana Brusoni, who is a scholar who does a lot of research on risky play on this topic. And Brusoni said that risky play is not about being unsafe. It's about allowing children to explore uncertainty, challenge themselves, and test their limits in ways that are developmentally appropriate. I want to highlight some of the sentences in this quote. I really love the beginning of this quote. Risky play is not about being unsafe. From that perspective, we know that it's not about putting children in unsafe situations. And I like the end of this quote. It's about allowing children to test their limits in ways that is developmentally appropriate, where we're not expecting children to do something that they're not ready, they're not prepared. And that can guarantee us that they're going to be safer. Also, Brusoni adds to this idea by saying that risky play is also about a thrilling and exciting play that involves a risk of a physical injury, but is often supported by the child's own risk assessment, right? So we're thinking about children naturally seek out opportunities to set boundary, to push their boundaries and their limits physically, like climbing structures, running fast down hills, balancing on logs. All these activities we know that provides chances for a physical development, but also can come with a risk, right, of some small injury or incidents. But what makes risky play special valuable is that children are often assessing the danger themselves. So when we are here to support them, we scaffolding their risk with them. You can see naturally how the child, by trying it out, they really realize how much they can do in that moment of trying out whatever it is, for example, climbing a log or anything like that. I saw this a lot with children, toddlers climbing up the slide. I know as educators, maybe some of you are like, up the slide, because we have been taught that go up the stairs, down the slide. But a few years ago, me and my team in the toddler room, we decided to challenge those ideas and allowing children, because they were always wanted to climb up the slide. So challenging those ideas and support them and keep them safe and see where that goes. And you see how children were at so many different levels. Some of them that were really good the first time climbing up the toddler slide, which was literally like 3 inches off the ground, where we have very foamy, the Lestocrete that is called a foamy soft ground. So even if they trip, we were there Nothing would happen. And some of them, they were just trying, they would put one foot at the bottom of the slide and they would get so excited. They even would shake of excitement, like, oh, I'm doing something that it's almost like a forbidden thing to do. And you could see how they all have different levels of how they would take that risk, and they wouldn't go further than that, right? So those are, as educators, I think is our role, not to eliminate or risk, but to recognize the benefits that await the hazard, right? And support children in through those experiences. Um, Another researcher center also mentions the type of risk play. I'm not going to go so deep into it, but just thinking about taking risks in heights like climbing or speed, biking fast, playing with dangerous tools, in quotations, dangerous tools, more real tools. For example, hammers and real nails, and with older children, even electric drills, right? So we can provide all those experiences for children. Even rough and tumble play is part of when children are not hurting each other. It's also being researched a lot about the benefits of that for children. Playing near elements, for example, natural elements, even water, mud, even the wind when it's very windy outside in the winter. We have a long winter in Canada, and snow when it's slippery. Learning how for children, learning with the children how to stay safe. In going back to my experience, my example I gave you, Cutter's tricycle moment, right? That's a classic example of play of heights and play at speed. It was thrilling for him, but also manageable, right? So knowing that as an educator, knowing that risky play, it's about visible, calculated risk. The child is aware of the challenges, promotes growth, independence. So it is important to also realize that when we play outdoors, and there's a connection between outdoor play, obviously, and risky play, although risky play can also happen indoors. And it's about that sometimes it's unpredictable. So as educators, I think to feel that we're going to provide safe environment for children is to really know that is unpredictable, but we need to be ready to respond to any situation or foreseen events. I'm going to post on the chat later on a resource that I think could be helpful, and it's a Canadian tool kit from the Child in Nature Alliance of Canada. And they call this is a risk management, dynamic risk management, they call it. And it could be very helpful for educators. So I'll post that later in the chat. So going back to Cutter's example, Cutter's tricycle balancing act was risky, but it wasn't dangerous. He was holding on, he was in control. I was nearby to step if he needed, right? So a little bit of scaffolding there when we're thinking about Vygotsky and, zone of proximal development, applying all that knowledge to really meet the child where he's at, right? So we know as educators, and probably I'm preaching to the choir here, that risky play has many benefits for children. I mentioned already some of those. And I mean, from building confidence to social skills, resilience, self-trust, problem solving, all those pieces. But when I saw Carter's spark in his eyes, that was confidence being built in real time. So I want you to think about that. All of the skills that you can build with children in real time, in the moment. But I'm going to focus right now more on the benefits for early childhood educators like me, because sometimes we don't talk enough about that. And there's many benefits for us. So as educators, it is easy to default to safety first thinking, right? So obviously it comes naturally in us. We want to keep children safe, which is a great thing. But it is important to begin to shift our mindset from stop that to how can I support you so that you can achieve that and you can do it safely, right? I think it's very important. So one of the benefits that is very important for educators, and it's that connection to foster deep relationships, mutual respect and trust with the children, right? So when we provide children the space to take appropriate risk, that signal confidence in the child's abilities. So we see them as competent and capable, then let's provide those opportunities. I would be very contradictory to say I see them as capable, competent, but then, I don't allow them to do all those things that actually demonstrate that. This strengthens a special bond. The bond that we probably have with the children already strengthen it even more. Over time, this trust enhances a sense of security as well, which is fundamental for learning and emotional regulation. So that trust and connection, big time. Also, supporting risk play challenges educators to refine their observation skills and reflection, I would say, right? That's what I did. I was always reflecting on situations like with Cotter. And it requires that the thinking of distinguishing what is risk and navigating those fears as well, and also our perceptions that we may have about danger or situations, our own beliefs, and even our personal biases of what is safe, right? About fears and the hesitation that we may experience. Through carefully observation and reflection, we can become more attuned to the children's cues, their decision-making process, and developmental readiness. So we can really will be ready to step back when they don't need us, and also be there and support them when they need that support. Another benefit for educators is that deepens our understanding of child development in action. So risky play provides unique window into the key of developmental domains. I'm not going to mention all, but resilience, coordination, all those. And watching a child navigate, for example, log balancing, climbing a tree, or, all those pieces really happen in real time and allows to connect theory to our practice more meaningful. We will be able to embed those pieces into to inform our documentation, curriculum planning, etc. Like I did in the example, I documented that to the parents, and that's another way for us to also communicate that understanding of development, of child development for families. And stronger partnership, talking about families, right? So Cutter's parents felt heard and supported, not only after, but before, right? It's important to have that communication before and after. When educators engages in these families, acknowledging, celebrating the child's growth, bring it from that light of look what what your child can do. And, they feel that connection with you as well. And they're maybe more open to see your perspective, because as parents, obviously, they are concerned about the safety of their child. And I want to say also that risky play, so just summarizing some pieces, that risky play is not recklessness, right? It's not recklessness. It's actually a responsible piece for us as educators. It is our opportunity to honor children's capabilities, scaffolding their learning, and step into a co-adventure role as they build confidence through action. So the next time that you see a cutter on a tricycle, take a breath, step closer, and be ready to celebrate their courage at the same time that you celebrate yours. Okay, so I think I'm going to.
Thank you so much, Veroushka. That was such a lovely way to end. If anyone has any questions, please pop it in the chat. And after we hear from Hilary, we will open the floor to questions. So please feel free to be putting it in the chat as we go along. So I would now like to ask Hilary to join us.
Thank you, Amos, and thank you, Veroushka. So just to say hi again, everyone. I know Amos introduced me at the beginning. Today, I'm speaking from the perspective of a program that I feel very strongly about. It's called Learn Through Active Play. And there is a lot more involved in our program than the piece that Veroushka is really highlighting, which is allowing ourselves to take a step back and knowing that risky play is responsible, not reckless. But our entire program really lends itself in all aspects to the support of risky play, and especially when it comes to, as Veroushka mentioned, challenging our and refining our observation skills to be able to allow risky play in our early learning environments. A really big piece of, as Veroushka mentioned, of assessing when a child is about to step into risky play is knowing that child. And I'm going to show you just a couple of slides about our program and how it really aligns itself well with supporting educators in using risky play or allowing risky play as a way to develop stronger relationships with children, with your colleagues, honing those observation skills, and how beneficial that can be. So I'm just going to pull this up. So one thing to start off with sharing is the fact that our program was developed with the objective of empowering educators to make their day better. We're based from Active for Life, which is an organization that developed Learn Through Active Play based on a proof of concept study that was focused on supporting physical literacy in children by including early childhood educators in this development of physical literacy in children in a way that previously Active for Life had focused on parents and K to 12 educators. And what was really great that came out of this proof of concept study was how much it benefited the educators. So yes, it benefits children, but the inclusion of an active play lens in program planning really benefits the educators. And we distilled this information down into two guiding principles. One is about creating active play habits, and the other one is about how active play enhances everyone's day. Something to really point out is that when we developed this program, we kept in mind that somewhere around 50%, depending on which jurisdiction you're in, but around 50% of our early learning professionals have not yet completed a post-secondary early childhood education program. So we kept our language very accessible in terms of some of the, I'm going to use the expression ECE jargon that not every early learning professional is familiar with. But the concepts that Veroushka was referencing in terms of scaffolding, zones of proximal development, the importance of that reflective practice, those are all really embedded in our program, but in a way that allows the language to be accessible to any early learning professional. And to start off with our creating active play habits, we have each guiding principle tuned down into empowerment objectives. So the first one is to create active play habits. To speak to Veroushka's example about how she paused before going over to little Carter, an idea of creating an active play habit as an educator might be that when you see a child about to engage in risky play or adventurous play, you pause before you step in and engage with that child. An example that I like to give, because I worked as a frontline ECE for years, is that there was a group of children that I worked with that were very interested in how Veroushka called it, that rough and tumble play. And they were basically interested in wrestling one another. And I spoke with my colleague, so the other ECE that was in the room with me, and I let that person know, I'm okay with the children engaging in this. How do you feel about it? And then we came up with a plan for making sure that it was appropriate. And then I went to the children and had the next time they started engaging in this wrestling, I stepped in and I said, started pointing out some of the hazards. You're trying to wrestle. What happens if someone falls against this tree stump? So I engaged in a conversation with the children about what limits would be in place. It needed to be in a grassy space. It couldn't be next to the pea gravel that was next to the play structures. And we had a whole discussion where the children were learning risk assessment, as Veroushka mentioned, in a way that allowed them that that they could make the assessment as to whether or not the play that they were choosing to engage in is safe or not. So in terms of our first empowerment objective about creating active play habits, it's important to sometimes it's important to involve the children in the creation of active play habits as well as the educator. Our second one is about making active play inclusive for all, and that lends itself well to risky play because we discuss examples of how it's important to not only make decisions that, oh, let's do this play because it's accessible to everyone. Examples are discussed about how to creatively include children in something that and I'm using quotes here, that they can't do. And in fact, they can do it if you just speak to your colleague and come up with a solution for being able to engage in that in that play. Next, we have setting up environments to invite children to engage in active play. So again, in line with what Veroushka was saying, it's important to know the children in our spaces so that we can appropriately assess what would be risky for them. There's lots of times I've delivered this facilitation to groups of educators that they haven't allowed any risky play to happen. As Veroushka mentioned, there's a lot of educators that easily default to safety. And I talk about the fact that, adding stepping stones, something for balancing. So it might not be balancing like little Carter, but you can sort of have those intros to adventurous play, to risky play, so that children can engage slowly and the educator can also slowly become accustomed to allowing children to engage in these risky play. The last one for this guiding principle is facilitating intentional active play opportunities that are developmentally appropriate. This really aligns well with what Veroushka was saying about zones of proximal development, because we need to know, as educators, we need to know each child holistically to be able to make the assessment as to what materials would best suit this child, accessing additional physical skills. And as Veroushka mentioned, it's not just physical skills that get honed with risky play. It's resilience, it's social skills, it's relationship developing, which brings me to guiding principle number 2, which developing stronger relationships through active play. Veroushka made a reference to the fact that as soon as Carter locked eyes with her, he had this big smile. And developing trust with children, that is a lasting effect that not only impacts that child long term, but as guiding principle number 2 states, active play enhances everyone's day. We center all of our information and all of our programming around the fact that using an active play lens makes the educator's day better. And if the educator's day better, the child's day is better. So if we're using our observational skills, if we're using our reflective practice in a way that allows us to make judgment calls in real time, taking that breath, taking a step, and then taking that step towards the child without saying stop or no, and instead asking things like, what's your plan? Do you feel safe? Using these tools to be able to develop stronger relationships with children, which then supports your day being better as an educator. Because if children feel safe and feel that they can trust you, guiding their behavior throughout the day is much more accessible and it can become a much calmer space because you've had those relationships developed. And a key part of this guiding principle in our program is developing stronger relationships with your children, but also with your colleagues, because as I mentioned, I went to my colleague and said, I'm comfortable with these children wrestling. Are you comfortable with these children wrestling? Because if I tried to allow something that my colleague wasn't comfortable with, that can cause friction between myself and my colleague, and that can really lead itself down a slippery slope. And it's so important to have those strong relationships with your colleagues so that you can speak together and come up with ideas that work for your group in a way that suits both sets of strengths in the room of the two educators. And one of the other things that Veroushka mentioned about assessing risky play in particular is about being able to enter and exit the play in a way that supports what's going on. And that's where 2C there, we talk about facilitating active play experiences without disrupting the play. And it's so important as educators that we not only know how to extend play and to support a learning, a playful experience, a play scenario, we need to be able to move in, support the scenario, and then exit again without the play episode or the play experience being disrupted. And in terms of the risky play aspect, I find that stepping in to ask those questions like, what's your plan here? That's always my go-to first question, because sometimes I might make the assessment as an educator that what a child is doing, the child should stop because it's risky. But if the child explains to me what they're doing, it better equips me to be able to support what the intention of the child is. A child might be trying to balance somewhere precarious, and then I say, "What's your plan here?" And the child says, "Well, I'm a tightrope circus walker," to use Veroushka's example of the Cirque du Soleil. And once I know that that's the intention, I might better be able to support what that child is doing, rather than letting the child know that what they're doing isn't appropriate. I can help them make it more safe, more appropriate by pointing out that the hazards that would make what the child is choosing to do hazardous as opposed to just risky. So again, in that scenario, it might be that you see that where the child is balancing is very close to something that they might fall and hurt themselves. I think it's a really great strategy to ask children, what would happen if you fell here? And then guide them to noticing the hazards themselves. And that better equips them to be able to make similar risky choices that are not hazardous, that are still, they're risky and safe at the same time. Another thing that Veroushka pointed out was that it challenges allowing children to engage in this risky play, challenges our efforts and to refine our observation skills. It means that we need to know that one child might need more support with what they're doing in terms of their physical body and how they're moving their body in space, whereas another child might need more support to choose to do something risky with an adult, with an educator close by. So it's so important to, on a day-to-day basis, all day long, hone those observational skills so that we know each child holistically in terms of their development. But I also like to throw out that it's important to know the context that that child came in that day as well. One of the things we talk about in the program number 2A there is about facilitating daily transitions. And one of those, as educators, our day is full of transitions. And one of those transitions is transitioning children into our space. And being able to communicate with families, something else that Veroushka mentioned, is so important because we can garner information from caregivers that are dropping off their children in a way that best supports that child's day throughout the whole day, which again, that empowers educators to enhance their own day. Because if I know that a child shows up and they didn't sleep well, they didn't eat a very good breakfast, that might let me know that this child is going to really need something sensory when they first arrive, and providing that child with what the child needs to transition into the space in a way that makes them feel safe and secure. Then later in the day, when that child is presented with the opportunity to risky play, do some adventurous play, they'll feel more supported, more secure, more settled into the space so that they can move forward with that risky play. I've gone the wrong way. One thing I want to point out about our program, a cornerstone of our program, is creating habits. And that creating small, tiny, doable habits is a much more successful way of making change than just overhauling. So a lot of the ideas that Veroushka was referring to in terms of educators becoming comfortable and familiar with allowing the space for children to adventurous play, to risky play. A big piece of that is creating active play habits that allows children to make those choices, because it can be that you make a habit of putting certain materials out and seeing how the children engage with the materials before you set the materials up, because children might make a choice to engage with the materials in a way that you don't expect. And then that allows you to become that observer so that you can hone your skills into, okay, well, how can I extend this play, and how can I encourage this child to feel secure enough to continue with the play? And when it comes to the very last piece that Veroushka mentioned is to celebrate. And when BJ Fogg created this idea of tiny doable habits, the biggest piece was hardwiring the habit by celebrating at the end. So you'll see in our list here that you decide what your active play habit will be, where will it fit into your program, and how will you celebrate. And when we talk about celebrate, we mean celebrate with the colleague and celebrate with the children. And it might be a different celebration. When you're celebrating with your colleague, it might be celebrating that that you supported that risky play and no one got hurt. And for the child, it might be that you're celebrating with the child that they successfully did something that they were trying to do. Balance, try something new. And risk can be different for different children. There might be some children that choose much smaller risks than other children. Veroushka referenced climbing up the slide, and how some children could be a little more tentative to try that out versus other children that scramble up right away. And it's up to the educator to be able to support both versions of that accessing of the risky play. This habit creation is a way, and I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here now. The habit creation is sort of a cornerstone of our program because it leads into all the other aspects of how, as educators, we can make small, meaningful changes the very next day, and then tweak those changes so that it best suits the children in our space, but also empowers us as educators to feel confident and competent in using an active play lens to support this. And this is so enhancing the educator's day is so important, more important now than ever, at a time when we're looking at retention issues in the sector, because we want educators to feel supported, to feel empowered, and to have a good day when they're at work. And providing opportunities for children to safely access risky play, and one of those ways is by creating our own active play habits, is a way to enhance the day so that we are supporting our workforce in a way that has it so that at the end of the day we might still be tired, but we feel fulfilled. So that's where I'll end there. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen about our program.
Well, thank you so much, Hilary. So there's a few questions coming in, so I'm just going to start reviewing some of them. First question, how do you support risk play during group care? So I don't know if Veroushka, you want to take the first shot at this one?
Sure. Just like Hilary was saying, right, it's very important to get to know the children that you have. You can have a large group, all children going to be on trying different things on different developmental levels, and meeting them, and you're working with a team as well, so you're not by yourself, right? So being on the same page, just as Hilary said, with the team is important, so that it's not only you, but everyone is supporting the children. I know it can be challenging when we have a large group, but sometimes when my experience, what I've seen is you may start supporting a child who is, I don't know, trying to walk on the log, and very soon you have 3, 4 children as well coming because they want to try that out. And then you have a group there, a small group, 5 or 4 children who you are supporting at the same time. So it can be done, but I think everyone has to be on the same page. They have to really believe in risky play, and supporting each other is a team effort, right? It's not just one person, and recognizing those individuals. So you assessed, and I think I said that at the beginning in terms of the observation, not only in observations of looking at individual needs of children, but also our supervision skills, right? Just, engaging in play with the children, moving around so that you are also helping out others, and seeking out those opportunities in the environment that you are, is very important. And just like Hilary was saying, with older children, it's actually great that you can actually ask them, what is your plan? Or assessing them asking them a question, do you think you'll be safe if you do that? Or, so that you are really negotiating with them and really supporting them for them to come up with the solutions. With the younger children, you have to assess more on your own because they cannot tell you, obviously. They tell you in a different way. But assessing it in that way, I think that would be my opinion.
There's another question that's piggybacks that question, and then after that one for you, Hilary. How do you ensure that all children, including those with disabilities, can safely engage in risky play?
So a big piece here is, again, it all comes back to knowing individual children. So there's going to be different ways to access risky play, because I think sometimes we think about risky play and then we think about how we're going to we're going to go into work tomorrow, we're going to upend everything, we're going to say, yes, climb trees and do this and do it. And that would be chaos. That would be absolute chaos. It's important to slowly introduce things to children. And in terms of that inclusion piece, it's knowing, okay, what would be considered risky because you almost need to have specifics, but what would be considered risky for a child with these abilities? And has that child tried to access it before? Because sometimes it's not necessarily, we talk a lot about emergent curriculum and child-led, and sometimes it's about paying attention to what those children are trying to do on their own and then helping them find a way to successfully do it. So it's not about bringing a child and saying, hey, you can climb a tree now. It's assessing what the children are trying to do themselves in their play, and how can you support that play in a way that draws their attention to assessing risk, because I've worked with toddlers. I have looked at 2-year-olds and said, "What's your plan?" And though it might be a one-word answer, it might just be run, because it might be that we're outside. Veroushka brought up, the long winter in Canada. It might be that I'm looking at a child saying, "What's your plan?" Because I think they're going to slip on a patch of ice, and that child might look up at me and just say, "Run," at 2 years old, and I might point down and say, "Well, what might happen if you run on the ice?" And so I have engaged with toddlers and in this back and forth assessment of risk in a way that's appropriate at their level. And to circle back again, just to bring it to the inclusion, because it is a little tricky to answer when I don't have something like a specific set, is that if you have a child that has limited mobility in some capacity and they're trying to do something that your immediate thought is they can't do that, they'll hurt themselves. Instead, go over, put yourself close by and assess and ask what's your plan? I love that as a question because it doesn't impose anything on the child. The child is free to share what the plan is, and then you can help guide the child with limited mobility to enact what they're trying to do in a way that's safe. So that's how I would sort of frame that, is that you need to be there with the child, assess it, and no matter how young a child is, say what's your plan and kind of talk them through that sort of problem solving of assessing risk.
Great. Great. And I think you spoke to this a bit around at what age can risky play begin, but I think you both kind of answered that. Is there anything you want to add to that? Are infants too young for risky play?
Any age.
Yes,
I think
I
just
believe.
risk looks different.
Yeah.
Risk looks different for each age group. Sorry, Veroushka, go ahead.
Yeah. And when we think, I work with infants for many years, and when we think about an infant learning how to walk, right, and all those milestones that it takes to get there, there's a lot of risk in that. It's a lot of risk in learning how to roll, how to crawl, how to pull themselves from things. And infants are so brilliant; they just find things and they know they need to do it. And with learning to walk, there's going to be goose eggs, there's going to be bruises, there may be, right? Because they are also, I want you to also see the daring of children, like they just so daring of trying things out. And I think infants is a great example because it's something that, those milestones are infants. Most atypical developmental children will go through those milestones, and there's a big risk on that. So I think just providing them with the safetiness, just as we've been talking, Hilary and I, we've been talking about that, and assessing those risks. So in the infant program, we have the environment set for them to actually take those steps and to risk, but they're not going to bump into things. There's no little things for them to choke. So absolutely, there is so much opportunities for risky play also for younger children.
Another question is,
I just
oh, go ahead,
want
Hilary.
to add on. I think, oh, so I risky play, and then we think climbing a tree. But for example, I worked at an infant room as well, and I once watched this. I'm trying to remember exactly how old she was, but I watched this. She was around 12 months or so, and I watched her spend an entire week trying to sit irregularly before trying to sit in a chair holding a toy. She would put her hands down on the chair as the first step of getting from standing to sitting, and then sort of turn her body into the chair. And she kept trying to do this with something in her hands, and she kept almost tumbling. It was child size chair. It's not an adult. It was all meant at her level. But I spent a week watching her try to do this and staying close enough that if she tumbled, I would be able to support and make sure that she didn't get injured. So a child sitting in a chair isn't what comes to mind when you think of risk, but that was risky for this child because she was learning a new skill. So I stayed close by enough that eventually when she was able to sort of learn that she could sort of sit sideways and then turn with the toy in her hand, she glowed and it was wonderful to watch. And that was risky for her. It's not going to be risky for a 4-year-old, but for 12 months, that was risky. So it depends on what our interpretation of risk looks like.
And that might vary by child. So another question is, how do you see outdoor play and risky play connecting to equity and inclusion in early childhood spaces?
Yeah. I have to think a little bit
Well,
about that.
especially when we
Can you
think
just repeat
about,
the beginning?
sure. In terms of outdoor and risky play, how do we see that connecting to equity and inclusion? One thing that, as I read that question, one thing that comes to mind is that there's cultural differences in what we consider safe for children. And so, how do you manage parent expectations as you try to encourage that risk for children?
I think
I think it's really important. Oh, sorry, Veroushka, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Hilary. So I think it's just important, just like my example, and that's why I included those pieces about the family, because constant communication, the daily communication, or what are we doing in our programs, what kind of ideas and pedagogies we are really practicing. I think it's important for parents to be aware of those. We can do that from different ways. Obviously, the daily communication is great. But also documenting children's learning is another way. So what kind of play are we doing? Our curriculum plan, our program plan weekly. So for parents to see what kind of activities we are setting up outdoors that they can support risky play, but children are safe. Yes, families can be, they may, risk is one of those that nobody wants. Obviously, not even us wants the child to, nothing serious happened. But I think just engaging in those communications, really building a bond and relationship with the families. So to build that trust that even though you are providing those risky opportunities for children within the safety boundaries, that it is because of the learning, it is supporting the children's learning. And I find in my experience, once you do that, parents are very open and no matter their cultural background, they're very open to see. And when they see the photos, when they see the documentation, all those pieces. Also, I think that going back to the question about the equity piece, there has been some studies done on ecological approach when focusing more on also how we as educators, we construct the child, right? So how we see the child in terms of when we think of equity. So who do we see that who do we see the child can do or cannot do, or based on our implicit biases and those pieces. So it's very important, even developmentally, right? So we can be in a toddler room, but I can have an 18-month-old and a 2.3-year-old toddler, and so am I comparing the children and I'm just judging them for what I think they should be or the way they should be. So really, when it comes, I think, with equity is definitely providing all children the maximum opportunities for all of them to really be successful in opportunities for risky play, outdoor play, and making adjustments and of their play according to each child, because they're all different, and also having those conversations with family, learning about them. I had conversations with some families about what they used to do when you were back home when you were a child. What kind of plays do you? And a lot of them, I grew up in Nicaragua, and I was climbing trees. I was outside on the street, right? So and just bringing back those memories in just a light conversation, they realize, wow, yeah, all the benefits. So I think those would be my points.
And I would just add on, in terms of the cultural differences in what we constitute risk, but there's also cultural differences in what we constitute play. So sometimes having those conversations or pointing out to parents and caregivers um, little details about what their child did that day and and the joy that it brought their child and how you as an educator supported that. So that way, families can feel that they trust you more because you talked that family through, your child tried to sit in the chair with a toy, and I was right there, and just she finally did it today, and talking about the joy that it's bringing the children, and the parameters that you have in place uh to support, to sort of assuage that risk. I think that's really important, and it, in particular, when it comes to inclusion, because if you have a child that has inclusion needs of any kind, often parents will be extra protective because they're so used to having to step up and step forward for their child. And in an appropriate way of, and in a relationship building way with that parent, you can point out how that child is trying to do something that maybe they didn't try to do before, and how you supported them to do that. So then the parent will learn to trust your judgment calls on what is and isn't a risk for that child in the future.
Okay. Fantastic. So this brings us to the end. In a generation that is shaped by concerns and fears of liability, we may have overcorrected our approach to children's play. It's essential that we distinguish risk, a natural and necessary part of learning that you've heard today, from hazard, which poses an unreasonable danger to children. So supporting children's development means creating environments where they can explore, take age-appropriate risks, and build the skills and confidence that they need for lifelong learning. A big thank you to our guests, Hilary Bartlett and Veroushka Coronel, for sharing their insights and expertise and experiences, and to all of you for being a part of this important conversation. We're excited to keep the momentum going, so be sure to keep an eye out for our upcoming Beyond the Podcast webinars in June and July, featuring Dr. Jean Clinton and Shalja Jan. We look forward to continuing these rich discussions with you, and until next time, take care and thank you again.